Hey guys, in today's episode, I'm digging in with email marketing ninja Dylan Kelley. Dylan runs email for 8 and 9 figure brands and has this stuff really down to a science. He was one of the first Klaviyo consultants in the early days when Klaviyo came out and really just knows his stuff when it comes to email. So we're going to be talking about things like flow architecture, segmentation and how not to overdo it with segmenting, SMS and where that fits in to the channel and really everything in between. So assuming you're focused on growing email as a channel, which you definitely should be, then you don't want to miss this episode. So stay tuned, dig in, and be sure to implement what you've learned. Welcome to Ecommerce Townhall, where 6, 7, and 8-figure e-commerce store leaders learn how to scale and streamline to get to the next level. On each episode, you'll see strategies from the industry experts behind successful stores that you can take back and apply with your teams right away. The show is brought to you by Helpflow.com. Helpflow provides 24/7 live chat teams to over 100 e-commerce stores and can help you drive more sales while providing an awesome customer experience through their live chat agents. Check them out at helpflow.com, but for now, let's dive into today's episode. All right, guys, welcome back to the e-commerce town hall. Today, I'm pumped to have Dylan Kelley. Dylan Kelley is CEO at Wavebreak, also a friend of mine. And Wavebreak is a boutique email agency that really helps 7, 8, and even 9-figure brands turn email into really like a top revenue driver for them. And there's so much going on with, advertising and iOS 14 and just, acquisition has always been hard. It just changes over time. But with all of that happening right now, it just shows like the importance of owning your audience, and email and SMS is a killer way to do that. And so we're going to dive in. We're going to dive in with Dylan into email from the perspective of, these brands that have turned it into a big channel for themselves. Like, how do they approach email? How do they think about it? And, how has that helped them to really have, a fortified owned audience that, Facebook, Google, TikTok, whatever advertising network's going to be big next, like it can't take it away. Right. We want you to see that from their perspective and really see how you can do that in your business as well. So Dylan, super excited to have you, man. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Like you mentioned, we've been friends for a long time, and it's great you've been on my show a few times, and it's great to be on your show now.
Yeah, I'm super excited, man. Before we get into kind of, email, like how to do email marketing, give me kind of a background. I know your background, but you're working with some big brands. You've been doing this for a long time. Like, give us kind of a snapshot of like the journey you've been on and how you got to this point, and like why the stuff that you know.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, like you mentioned, Wavebreak's a boutique agency. All we do is email and SMS for e-commerce brands and retail brands. And that's 100% all we're focused on. And I started Wavebreak back in 2016, really as one of the first agencies in this space focused on email, because I saw the gap in the marketplace. So, I was an outsider when it came to e-commerce, typical background of a lot of people who are in e-commerce now. I was doing this affiliate marketing stuff. Sometimes you make a lot of money, sometimes you don't. I saw these brands on Instagram starting to grow, think Movement watches, the Pure Vita bracelets. I was like, wow, that's really cool. I want to get in on that. And I had this experience doing different things in web design and affiliate marketing. And so I created Wavebreak back in 2016, first initially focused on conversion rate optimization. But that didn't really last very long. It only lasted a few months, because what ended up happening is, a brand that's still around today that's been really successful in the D2C and Shopify circles, hired me to optimize their landing pages that they're sending Facebook ads traffic to. And what ended up happening was larger brands entered the space, which is something that we're seeing even more now, almost 5 years later since then, and drove up the cost of ads. And they were basically like, hey, Dylan, we can't figure, like, our traffic's to zero. This was a 7-figure brand at that time. Now I think they're well into the 8 figures, probably approaching 9 figures, but they're like, we can't afford to keep you on because there's no traffic for you to optimize. And I was like, okay, like that sucks. And then what I started noticing was, like, for these brands, particularly the up and coming brands, like they really overlooked email. Klaviyo wasn't as popular as it is now. SMS wasn't even really a thing for, especially like up and coming brands who are experiencing high growth on Shopify. And I really saw that gap, and I was one of the first people to see it. And that's kind of when I went to work, because I had this experience designing landing pages. Emails are essentially a landing page that you're sending, a few times a week through triggered sequences, took that, applied it to the email channel, figured out it worked really well. First client increased their email revenue 5x within 60 days, had a super successful Black Friday, continued to scale and grow from there. Now we're a small boutique team powering email, like you said, for a lot of 8 and 9 figure brands. We've had success scaling programs from 5 million a year to 30 million a year, and taking those economies of scale to our clients who are only doing 5 million a year in total revenue and applying those learnings to their business. And yeah, like you said, like email is a powerful revenue driver. SMS is now too. And we're really focused on quality over quantity approach, working with a select few clients, driving maximum results from the channel, and just building really great programs around it. So that's a quick overview of what Waybreak is and how I got into it.
Awesome. I like your style, man. We both talk really fast. Most people would say we're going to slow down a little bit for the listener, but what I would say is if you're watching on YouTube or listening on the podcast, you can actually slow it down too. So maybe listen at 75% if Dylan and I
This
talk
is not one to listen in 2x speed. It's funny because
your brain will
people
explode.
Be like, they're like, hey, I only have 30 minutes for a meeting. And it's funny because like people will email me and they'll be like, it's fine, Dylan talks fast, we only need 15. But it's just because I get really excited about email and its potential. But yeah, definitely not a podcast to listen to at 2 times speed with both of us talking.
I love it. But you'll get a lot of content ideas. We'll cover as much as a 90-minute podcast in 30 minutes. Getting into it though, why email? Like why should brands be focused on email? Maybe paint a picture of like a little more depth of what happened to that brand that kind of got you focused on email. What do you see happening to certain clients that are coming to you now? Is there anything like specific related to iOS 14? Like why is email so important as a channel for brands?
Yeah, ultimately just like you said, like there's been a shift where everybody initially was focused so much on acquisition because nobody had any customers. Now acquisition is getting a lot harder. So if channels like Facebook, it's getting more competitive, it's getting more expensive. It has been even before updates like iOS 14. It's just a trend, right? Even TV, like a TV ad 20 years ago is not cheaper today. It's more expensive. And it's just a trend in advertising. Advertising is always going to cost more. The cost to acquire customers is always going to get more expensive. And what's crazy in digital is it's increasing even faster on a platform like Facebook. And then you have the pandemic accelerating spend of bigger retailers with deeper pockets, buying up that inventory, increasing prices. Then you have iOS 14 now rolling out, which nobody's still, I don't know when exactly this is going to air, but like we're still recording this early on where we're not really sure what's happening yet. Nobody really knows what's going on. Not a lot of good things are happening in terms of iOS 14. We don't have a lot of people saying, wow, my Facebook ROAS is going up, or like we had a record Facebook ROAS this month. Like nobody's having that. Like ROAS from 2016 to present has done nothing but go down. It doesn't. And what I'm saying is like Facebook, it doesn't mean get rid of Facebook as a channel. You definitely need it. But the problem is people have been so focused on acquisition, and acquisition is just getting more competitive and it's getting harder. So you can't just build a business off the back of acquisition anymore. You need to start thinking about how you can do more of your existing traffic. So even influencer marketing, it's getting more expensive. SEO, it's getting way more competitive. Google search, same thing's happening. Cost of advertising is getting expensive. There's more competition. And you're not going to be able to survive if the price keeps increasing on all these channels and the return on investment keeps getting lower and lower. And what's so great about email and SMS is it extracts revenue from what you're already doing inside your customers and inside your traffic. It's not going to solve your problems if you have no customers and you have no traffic. But if you don't have a fully optimized email and SMS program and you're spending a lot of money on Facebook or you're doing a lot of organic search and SEO to drive a lot of traffic to your website, you're probably leaving a significant amount of revenue on the table because you don't have an optimized program. And that's what's great about email. It maximizes more of what you're already doing and drives a lot of revenue. It's still the highest ROI in most of marketing. It's really hard to beat. Like even some of our highest performing clients from an ROI standpoint, they're spending $1 on our service and they're getting over $300 back. Our lowest performing clients are getting anywhere from 5 to 10x return versus like compare it to a Facebook ad. Like, did you ever get a 300x return on a Facebook ad? And those ROIs are with their fee included. So it's an extremely profitable channel. It's money that's already in your business and nobody's really doing it well. It doesn't matter if you're, a $2 million a year retailer or a $200 million a year retailer. I would say really less than 5, and that's probably being generous. Less than 5% of brands are really doing email and SMS well. And most brands have a lot of untapped revenue in their customer base. That's going to be make or break in the next 5 years as Facebook ads continue to get more and more expensive. You're going to have to double down on the customer, and email is a great way to do that. Not just diversify your marketing, but build a stronger brand that's actually going to stand the test of time.
That's killer. I mean, did I hear you right in saying the lowest performing clients are at a 10x return, $1 in, $10 out?
Yeah, like 5.5x, I think is our lowest. And then like
Okay.
5 to 10x is kind of our lowest bucket of clients. But even then, it's like that's still way better than the
Oh
best
yeah.
performing Facebook ads nowadays.
Yeah, 3 to 4 is good on Facebook.
I mean,
Depends
that's
on
like
what obviously
amazing.
where you
Like
look. But
yeah, and we have clients who go negative on the first order because of what we do so powerful on the back end, and like that's becoming more common. Terms like LTV CAC, like that's a thing now. Like 5 years ago, nobody was talking about LTV CAC because like it wasn't, you didn't need to be because you're getting a 3 to 4x ROAS on your Facebook ad, so you're profitable on the first sale.
what do the brands get right about email? Like you mentioned, it enhances what you're already doing. It's the highest ROI channel. Less than 5% of brands are really doing it well. Um, we'll get into some like super tactical stuff, but at a high level, like what do you see brands that do well with email? What are the high level things that they're doing right? How are they thinking about email? Like what parts of their email strategy are they focused on? Like paint a picture of what does it look like to do email well, and then we can start diving into like each part a little more individually.
Yeah, the biggest thing is it comes down to focus for brands. So the brands who are actually focusing on email and a channel like now, like SMS, like we can just loop them together and call it just email. But I'm also talking about SMS now, which we can get into later on how
Yep.
powerful a channel that is. But they just focus on it and they realize that it's a great channel and it should be a top priority. And that's like first and foremost. Like most companies, their marketing budget is broken and it's 100% dedicated to acquisition. They're spending 500 grand a month on Facebook ads and they're paying for Klaviyo and that's about it. And then when brands realize that email is powerful, then it's funny, they start to focus on it, but then a lot of them focus on it in the wrong way and then they just like run their list into the ground. And so
Yep.
it's kind of a tricky balance, but the right brands realize the power of it and they invest their resources into it like they would it's a Facebook ad.
And what are some of those right ways? Like we might focus on some of the mistakes later, but like what are some of the things? Or I mean, take that question actually, whichever way you want to do. Like, what I really want people to be able to understand from this question is, what does it look like to do email well? And so if it's easier to explain that from the perspective of like mistakes, we can dig into that. Or if you have like a good example of like, this is where we ultimately try to get clients to, we could dig into it from that perspective. But, what does it look like when a brand gets it right or does it
Yeah.
wrong?
Great question. Yeah, so we can just start and I can just walk through like for example an example client like where they start with us and then where we end up taking them and then you kind of see like the full gamut of what we do and like where brands start and where we end up bringing them to and continue to optimize from. But essentially like when you break down email, it's complex at its core. Like there's a lot of things going on. There's deliverability, there's creative, there's testing, there's optimization, there's all of these like different pieces to an email program, but ultimately it's very simple. It's not easy, but it's very simple. And so we look at it at the high level, which is like overall, like first and foremost, where's email at as far as like a revenue driver? A lot of people talk about what percent of revenue are you getting from email. I think that's great, but it's always not a great indicator. Like you could have a really engaged list and half your revenue is coming from it, but you don't have any triggered emails set up on the email flow automation side. So we get clients who come to us who don't really have any automation set up. So we're talking abandoned carts, we're talking post-purchase journeys, we're talking, indoctrination series, welcome series to convert first people to their first purchase, people to their next purchase, recover abandoned carts, retarget people who view that don't buy. Like all of these things are really important, but a lot of our clients come to us with either few of them set up, none of them set up, or they're set up and they were set up 3 years ago and they haven't been given any love since. And these are tools that can power 10 to 20% of your revenue just from the automated emails alone. And they're almost always underutilized. And since you're always sending them every single day, it's something that you should be optimizing and something that should be built on a best-in-class methodology. Get over to the campaign side. Those are your one-off sends, your newsletters. Some of the more, I guess you could say like higher revenue brands come to us. They're usually sending a decent amount of those, but they might be sending too much or they're sending repetitive content or they're not sending great content. So making sure you're balancing the volume of your sending, that you're sending enough to really maximize revenue from the channel, but you're also sending great content and your segmentation is smart so that you're not just mailing your list into the ground because like there's a lot of companies with huge lists who are getting no return from them because they have not a great engagement from their list because they focused on the wrong thing. So ultimately, it's like you need a great suite of email automation that's built to the customer journey. That's another big mistake we make. It's just people just guess the timing, they guess the content and everything. And it's the same with agencies. They'll just go in and copy and paste the same templates. And it's just like, that doesn't work. Cause like we have a client who's really successful who sells mattresses. They're getting an insane ROI on our service because we built it around their customer journey. We also have another client who sells phone cases, teeth whitening, whatever it may be. It's like all these products are bought differently and you need to build the email program around those. But then come back to those two core pieces of your email marketing, which is like the automation and then the ongoing campaigns at a high level. And then we'll take them to a place where that's fully optimized on both of those, which we can get into more details as we go.
Awesome. No, this is killer. I got a couple of clarifying questions related to those pieces. First, how do you focus on measuring the financial success of email as a channel? Is it not percentage of revenue? Like, help us understand, like, how do you define it when a client comes in, so that people can kind of quantify it for themselves of how they're doing and then setting a goal of where they want it to get to?
Yeah. So for us, it's based on our internal data that we have working with all the brands we have over the last 5 years. But ultimately, to find that, what we're looking at is what is your existing setup from literally like a checklist perspective of, do you have this? Do you have that? And then what is the amount of revenue you're getting from the channel and where is it coming from within that? So then we can kind of benchmark it with our internal data and say, hey, you're getting a lot of your revenue from email, but you only have half the best practices that we set up with our clients set up. So you can drive a lot more. As far as specifics around that, it varies depending on client, average order value, industry, but we have all those metrics in house that we can benchmark against to predict like where we'll be in 90 days for the client. And we'll build the program to be able to hit that target through our initial strategy using our own in-house data.
Awesome. So it's like a mix of an audit and the revenue part of like, okay, like if you're only doing 20% of what you should be and you're driving 30% of your revenue through email, imagine if you got the rest of that stuff in place, right? I had a clarifying question on one more part of that. You said figuring out how much revenue is coming from email as a channel and then where it's coming from within the channel. Can you kind of split those out at a high level so people can be thinking of that from the like a segmentation perspective? So are you saying like some of it's coming from pre and post or pre-sale, some of it's coming from, abandoned carts, some of it's coming from, retention? Like when you say where it's coming from in the channel, what do you mean?
Yeah. So we mean like, similar to the checklist, it's like, okay, like how much is coming from campaigns? What percent of email revenue is that? What campaigns are driving it? And then on the automation side, or what's called like flows in Klaviyo, for example, what flows are driving the most revenue? Like we have some clients who have like one flow set up, they're sending every other day and they're seeing a lot of revenue from email, but they're missing everything on the back end. They don't even have an abandoned cart set up. That sort of thing. And so just looking at the breakdown, because internally we have metrics and we know roughly, like depending on your industry, the size of your business, what percent of your email program should come from each of those. And it's going to vary. So I can't get into super specifics. But that's ultimately what we look at. And so, yeah, we're benchmarking it on both of those things. And that's how we can find like where you actually should be. Cause you could be doing 35% of your revenue from email, but you could just be sending one email a month and it's doing really well because it's doing $100,000 in revenue and you're a $300K a month brand.
It's powerful. I'm thinking of it kind of from a sports analogy, that like, how much can you bench lift, right? Doesn't assume like every single part of your health, right? Like maybe you crush bench lift, but like you can't run half a mile without dying.
Yeah. Or what's your body weight? Like you could be massively overweight, 400 pounds, and like you can bench more than me, but like I might be stronger than you pound for pound.
Exactly. So what I'm really hearing, for the listeners is like, you got to look at this holistically, right? Like, are you living a healthy life is kind of the measure of like, are you healthy? Like, can you function well for the rest of your life? It's not just about percentage of email. It's about, how much revenue you're driving, where it comes from, your holistic plan for email, like all those things. I think that's super powerful. One of the questions I had as we were preparing is like, what are the must-have flows for stores? And I don't know if that's too much of like a newbie question. I think what I'm more looking at is like for the listener, like all of our listeners, like 6 and 7 figure brands. So like they're not starting from scratch. They're all going to be doing some form of email. Maybe they're on MailChimp, but like a lot of them are going to be on Klaviyo or some of the other guys. And so I guess I'm curious from their perspective, like they probably have abandoned cart flows, but like, what are some of the lowest hanging fruit flows that you see that when you get those in place for brands, they do really well? You rattled them off earlier, but let's slow down and kind of go through some of the must-have ones.
Definitely. The top performers are typically your welcome series, which is growing the list. So through on-site pop-up, through new subscribers coming in as customers, through your footer, that's usually top performers. So getting people to become a first-time customer. Abandoned cart is always a top performer. Browse abandonment in Klaviyo. So setting up the viewed product tracking on your website, being able to retarget people who don't buy. Those are three that are really powerful, that are a great place to start. And then beyond that too, starting to think more about the customer journey. People who buy once, how do you get them to buy again? People who buy twice, how do you get them to buy again? So starting with what we call cross-sell and retention flow initially, which is you're not really pushing any discounts. You're just trying to get people to buy. And then if the brand is open to doing a discount, we'll later put them into more of a win back series to really try to win them back as a customer. We'll do different things based off different products, and we'll get more granular and segmented over time as we optimize the client's account. But really, it's really that simple. But then you get it to scale, and it comes about optimizing. So sure, you have an abandoned cart, but did you set it up 2 years ago and you're doing 100 grand a month, and now you're doing $1 million a month? How much revenue are you putting through it? Oh, we're putting 70 grand a month through our abandoned cart flow. Great. So a 10% increase is an extra 7 grand a month, which is, a lot more revenue per year, right? Like almost 100 grand. And then that would scale over time with your business. So like also too, it's like people get too complex and like they want to add like 30 flows, but sometimes it's better to be simple and then optimize what you already have, because it gets more and more important at scale too. That's what we notice with our bigger clients. It's like, we'll run a small test. It'll only increase something by like 0.5%. But if you're at a scale of like $100 million a year, that's a lot of revenue from like one single test.
Yeah. Oh, let's dig into that, because I know we wanted to talk about optimization. So I'm going to kind of change up the order a bit, but what's the right way to be doing optimization on email as an entire channel? Like, what are some of the best practices that you focus on getting in place with clients? And like, what are some of the routines that, brands that are running email in-house, would benefit from, layering into how they do email? Kind of the equivalent of like we talked about before with Facebook ads, right? Like people, you don't just turn on a Facebook ad and see what happens. Like there's a whole routine that people do. And like ad buyers know that. And even clients know that now, where it's like when they evaluate agencies, they know if like, oh, like they don't even look at ROAS, like that'd be a huge issue, right? So I'm curious, like from the email side, like what's a robust way to do optimization correctly?
Yeah, well, it's really similar to optimizing your e-commerce site or optimizing everything. I think a lot of brands try to just throw things at the wall, or they come up with a rule like every email must have an A/B test, which sounds like great in practice because it's like, okay, cool, we're always going to optimize. But then you end up just A/B testing subject lines for a quarter, and then you don't actually learn anything because there's no real true hypothesis or any true test or methodology behind what you're trying to discover. So just like we think about, our strategic framework for building out a program, we think about how we optimize our clients' accounts very strategically as well. So thinking back to like, we live and die by the 80-20 rule, just because it is like so powerful and so easy. So it's like, what is the 20% we can test to drive 80% of the results? So on the flow side, so for automations, it's looking at, okay, what is the top revenue driving flow? And then from there, what are the top emails? And then once again, it's like, we're looking at everything holistically. It's like, what is the gap? Okay, well, if we're seeing open rates above industry benchmark, but conversion rates are lower than industry benchmark, we're going to test creative or offer or something in there to optimize for a better conversion. Or if open rates are low, we're going to optimize for subject lines. But if we're already getting great subject lines, why are we going to optimize subject lines? That'd be a waste of a test and a waste of resources. And similar for the campaign side with your one-off sends that you're doing a few times a week, looking at that the same way, like it's pretty straightforward. Klaviyo even has a feature called Smart Send Time, where it'll automatically determine after a few sends, like what the best time to send an email is. So running that and just getting together what you would imagine in your head to be a dialed program, but like doing it very strategically. So like, what are our top performing campaigns of the past? And are doing more of those, which isn't even really a straight A/B test, but it's more of like when you're being more strategic about your planning, and then A/B testing everything. So, like for one particular client, we know that kind of out of the box subject lines perform a lot better than, get 15% off the shampoo. It'd be better than be like, not like you won't believe this, but just to be a little bit more crazy, have a little bit more fun with pop culture. They always do well. Their top, 30 campaigns of last year had crazy subject lines versus like 20% off normal kind of content, and just really starting to discover like, okay, this is what the best subject line is for us. This is the best send time. These are our top performing campaigns, which is really straightforward and really black and white. But I think people overcomplicate it. It's just like, what would you want to know when you're going to press send to maximize your results? And then you optimize for that. And then what we do with our clients is we have the economies of scale of already doing these tests and operating with clients over the last 5 years across a bunch of different industries, over 1 billion emails sent. So we can go and take our learnings from our existing client base and apply them to our current or our new clients from day one. So like, we don't even have to waste 6 months testing and optimizing. We know in general for your industry, XYZ is a good metric, or this is XYZ best practice, and then starting from there. But ultimately, like, optimizing, people try to make it more complex than it needs to be. And also, don't optimize before you build. If you're missing out, you're not sending enough, or you're missing some of those key flows we talked about, you should build those first before you go and try to optimize and A/B test every single email you send.
That's a good point. I mean, so if you're not doing some of those best practices, or you don't have like all the main flows that matter, like, don't worry so much about like split testing every email within the one flow that you have, right? Like, maybe get the rest of the stuff in place, then start testing. I think that makes a lot of sense. We didn't really dig in too deep on, because I want to transition into SMS in a second, but we didn't dig too deep on, automation and segmentation. And one of the things that caught my attention as we were chatting before is, you mentioned like people they segment too much, like they get segmentation wrong. I don't know if that's exactly what you meant or what you said. Frankly, I might be paraphrasing, but it sounded like there was something contrarian about how you think about segmentation and automation. Let's dig into that part. Like, what do people get wrong when it comes to, segmenting and or automating with email?
Yeah. So I think segmentation is extremely powerful, especially for the right company. But I think especially right now in the place that we're in like this world of direct consumer and high growth, and like retention's now like this hot, cool thing. I think segmentation is a bit overrated. And if you get too segmented and too granular, what ends up happening is you end up speaking to a very small percent of your audience, and you end up missing out on money versus, being a little bit more generic, but you're ending up going to drive better results, and you're going to communicate with more of your customers. And I think people do that in the wrong way. So like, it's like, hey, John, you bought black pants. You might like these red pants. That's great. But what about looking at segmentation from a more holistic level, like we were talking about earlier, and a more strategic level of like, where's the most money hiding in your business? Like, okay, or are 80% of your buyers one-time buyers? You have a one-time buyer problem. That's the segment you should focus on, not red pants. You might also like these blue pants. And thinking about segmentation in that way, more based on customer behavior, not just based on like customer attributes, and then optimizing for it as well. So making sure you're also emailing a segment that's large enough. So that's another mistake we see people make. It's like, okay, we're going to go after people who bought the red pants. Well, it's only 2,000 people on their 500,000 list. So even if, half the list converts, it's only 1,500 orders versus, having a lot more people convert off that 500,000 person email. Even though it might be a more generic message, you'll get more people to your site, and you end up making more money, and you'll be able to keep a relationship with more people. And so just being able to balance that is super important. The one segment that is small that you can hit up and like always drive revenue from, for the most part, are the VIPs. So like your top 10 or 20% of customers, or less, depending on how big the brand is, and how many customers you have, is a really great segment that's really small, but can actually drive a lot of revenue. And I think that's the way brands should look at it more, is like, where's this person in their customer journey versus, what did they buy? Might they like now? And optimizing for that. Like, do a mix of both, but like, don't worry too much about sending a super personalized message for everybody, especially on the campaign side. You can always set that up later, in a flow or something. But first, make sure it's even worth it, because so many brands are wasting resources to send something to some that's only going to send to 0.001% of their customer base every single month. And it sounds great from a customer experience perspective, but ultimately it's a waste of money for the business and not going to drive an ROI.
Dude, that's super, super powerful. This brings me back to a question I had earlier. I still want to hit on it because I think it fits here. You mentioned a mistake that brands make with email is not defining the customer journey right? And they're just guessing what the customer journey is, or guessing the timing on certain things. And then as we're digging into automation and segmentation, like what I really heard you say is focus in on the customer journey and figure out like the segment in the customer journey where there's the biggest opportunity, right? Can you paint a picture of like how people should define their customer journey? Not what is a customer journey, but more of like, how does somebody map that out for their business? What are like the big levers within a customer journey where you see brands get it wrong, whether that's, time to reorder, lapse time is something that came up. I don't know what you guys would call it, but, there's a lot of different things that go into a customer journey. How should somebody be thinking about how to architect their customer journey so that they can then be doing testing within each of those? How do you define a customer journey with clients? And what are like the main levers?
Great question. So our most successful clients will invest in outside firms who specialize in this to do in-depth research on their customer base. And then, I mean, that costs tens of thousands of dollars, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. But in terms of like what you can do on an actionable level for people listening to this podcast is like, what I like to do is just look at the most successful customers that you have, your best customers, and then literally go through and like look through the journey of those people. Like what's great about a platform like Klaviyo is if you find a profile, you can see the entire history of that person. So you can see like, hey, here's the first product they ordered. Here's the second. Here's when they're converting. Is it off email? Is it off this? And then you can really start to figure that out. And then, use your data and analytics to also determine the windows of when people are going to come back. So in terms of like timing, that's really helpful, but also you got to realize your timing is probably warped, especially if you don't have a great program bringing people back. So if your average reorder date is 66 days, but you haven't been sending anything post-purchase besides campaigns, you can probably make that lower if you start going for the sale around day 20 or 30 while people are really excited about your product. So use that as a benchmark and then build the strategy around it. As far as data goes, how to find your best customers and what that might look like at a high level, like that's kind of how we think about it. Happy to dive in deeper there. But then also too, from a strategy and a content framework, just thinking about the customer and like putting yourself in their shoes. And what's really helpful about what you do, John, with live chat is you have a lot of conversations with customers in terms of like, why are you banning this cart? Why are you banning this cart? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? And they have their objections and they surface these. So in your abandoned cart emails and your browse banner emails, you should be feeding these to people before they even have the chance to ask and taking all those objections off the table. So by the time it comes for them to press the place order button, they don't have any of these objections. So that is another aspect of customer journey, how to integrate it into email is just think about how people buy. Look at your emails too. And it's like, does anybody really want to read a 5-paragraph image email that like you got to like zoom in to see, or an email that you can't even see in dark mode? Like that's customer journey related as well. And thinking about email from that perspective as well. So like finding your best customers, building the program around that, and then also finding the friction points and building the program around that as well, on a more content level throughout the customer journey, through email.
Yeah, I think that's powerful. Like, it sounds so simple to just say like segment down to the top customers, most valuable customers in Klaviyo, and then map out like what was their journey, like how long did it take for a reorder, what did they reorder, where did that come from. Where my head kind of goes with this type of stuff is where I get excited is being able to get the end result of those insights. And so for people like 6 and 7 figure brands have teams, right? That doesn't mean like as VP e-commerce or something that like you should be doing every single part of that. But like definitely I think an action from this episode is build that segment and get your team to basically get 100 customer journeys mapped out and then somehow figure out how to mesh them all up in Google Sheets or in a drawing and then present it to you, because there's going to be insights that come from that. You're going to realize like everybody reorders within like this 30 to 40 day window, right? That's probably your reorder time, and see what you can do to bring that to 15, right? Those are probably short time periods, but you get the idea. Like get your team to compile that.
Yeah. And it depends on the product too. And what's great too is like, let's say you don't have a lot of time. If you're CMO level, VP level, director level, or even just the founder, CEO, or entrepreneur, co-founder, like you can just look at 100 profiles in the course of an hour or two inside Klaviyo, and you can really use your gut to kind of feel it out. If you don't have the time to or money to invest in a firm that's going to do this for $100,000 and actually like map everything out, you can kind of feel it out, especially until you get to that level. Then you just pay someone to do it for you if you have the budget.
Yeah.
And they'll go through and they'll even interview customers. And that's when it gets really powerful, because you can say like, hey, I didn't buy because XYZ exact reason. And then you have the survey data. And then we put that in abandoned cart emails. You guys do it with your live chats. And that's when like, it's like you can A/B test buttons all day. You can A/B test timing all day. But when you actually take real objections off the table through this customer data and you build the program around what customers are actually doing, like that's our secret sauce and why we drive so much revenue for our clients.
Yeah. It's funny. Like secret sauce is usually just a lot of very sophisticated work that, people won't do themselves. That's what I've seen. Cause like when you've done that 500 times, like it's very, very simple for you to do it for one more brand and see, okay, here it is. It's like a doctor, right? Like if you've diagnosed something 500 times, like it's pretty fast for you to see it. And that's the benefit of working with people that do this stuff all the time. I want to spend some time digging into SMS here at the end. Like you mentioned earlier, like lumping in email and SMS, like it's all part of the game now. I want to rapid fire through some questions to understand like how stores should be thinking about where SMS fits in and like the cadence between email and SMS and that balance. There's a lot of different angles we can take, but I think that everyone would agree like, okay, we should be doing SMS, but I don't think people have really understood like how it fits into the overall email architecture. So I want you to kind of explain how that fits in the balance between email and SMS, kind of paint a picture on that.
Yeah, in terms of performance or more in terms of like executing tactically alongside email?
I think it's more of executing tactically. So like where does SMS fit into the automated flows? Like if you're doing campaigns, like do you do SMS and email or do you split it up? That second one might be a little bit too granular, but more about how to execute both in a way where they serve each other rather than just like we layered in some SMS randomly and like we'll see how it goes. Like SMS is kind of a very related channel to email. So how does it all fit together?
Right. Yeah. I mean, this goes back to a bigger problem inside of e-commerce, which is there's a lot of experiences that just aren't aligned. So you'll see a TV ad with one discount, you'll see a Facebook ad with a different discount, and then you'll get an email with a different offer and a text with a different offer. Like that's not good. That doesn't feel good to the consumer, and it creates a lot of friction because now they're confused, they're overwhelmed, they don't convert. The same happens with email and SMS. If you're not sending messages that are complementary, following the same calendar, accelerating the same automated sequences, but you just have some SMS messages sequenced in there, you're going to see a lot better results when those are working together. So that's the way we think about it is like, okay, think about your email and SMS channels. What are the most important messages you're sending? And then send those messages also on the SMS channel because it's cutting through the noise at a rapid rate. And then also like build that list too. Like like a channel like SMS is once in a lifetime. Like we got lucky with email. It's a list you build and can own. Who knew something else would come out that we can do that? Like SMS is really like a miracle. Like the fact that there's two channels where you can own the actual list where like, you know, we've had Facebook and Google and YouTube and Instagram, which is like, you know, those are both owned by the same two companies. Like the fact that we have another own channel is like really powerful. And just, yeah, it's as simple as layering it on top of email and making sure like, you know, you're not sending a different discount out to the text audience as you are to the email. And you're creating that just like discombobulated, disjointed experience that a lot of brands end up doing, especially at scale. Like you'll see this with retail, like they'll have their TV ads with the sale. And like I said, you get the Facebook ad with a different offer and an email with a different offer and a text with a different offer. Like it's just a mess. So making sure everything is congruent and aligned and your overall marketing strategy is holistic is super important. And when that happens, we see increased performance from email and SMS because you're just everywhere. And that's the best marketing. It's like when you're everywhere.
And I want to dig in a little bit more into the cadence, right? So I get it of like keep the customer experience aligned across the channels. Help us understand when it's right to use SMS and when it's right to use email as far as like the sequence of communication or how long it's been from the trigger or whatever the methodology is how you think about it. Like when do you send SMS versus when do you send email in either a campaign, but I think more of this question is about in automated flows and things related to triggers, like when SMS, when email.
Yeah. Campaign is really straightforward. It's like your most important messaging. Just send that, right? Your sale campaign, your new product launch, sending like once or twice a week, maybe once or twice a month. If you're a brand that is like, you know, we don't want to over communicate or potentially annoy customers. We found like twice a week is really good. You know, campaigns, it's simple, right? It's like, is this an important message? Is it like not a common occurrence? Send it via text so everybody can see it. Automation side, it's a little more tricky. But it's very similar concept. So like when somebody signs up to your list, shoot them a welcome text, shoot them a reminder a few days later, because they're going to see it. That's what's great about SMS is it's like, it's not like it's cannibalizing any sales. It's just those 80% of people, those 70% of people, or maybe even 90% of people who aren't opening your emails. They're seeing these messages because SMS is getting a massive open rate. So it's like, if you got 100% open rate on your email, you drive a lot more revenue. That's the revenue that SMS is driving. So your welcome series is really important to be through SMS. Abandoned cart is really powerful through SMS. That's one of the highest ROI messages you can send in all of SMS. And then also, you know, working it into post-purchase, but like not like an email where you'd say like, hey, thank you. And then you send them a text a day for a week to get them indoctrinated into the brand. Like just do that via email and most important flows as well. So like win back, you could do via text as well there. But yeah, ultimately most important messaging, send it through SMS.
Got it. That makes sense. Is it reasonable with the automation to lean towards SMS when it's close to the trigger and then start skewing out to email. So with an abandoned cart, SMS within the first 30 minutes to 1 hour, email after that, right? Like tie it to the actual action that caused you to communicate. Is that a legit way to think of it?
Yeah, you can do that, or you can do something too we call like a two touch, where we'll send both messages at the same time, and you'll get a text and an email on your phone at the same time. And then you're a lot more likely to see that and convert, because it's like brand. Oh, what is this? You notice it in your sea of 100 other notifications. But then also, like you said too, it's like example on a welcome series, you send the welcome series email and the first text at the same time. The reminders maybe at the same time, and then you have like 4 other welcome emails, but you don't have any other welcome texts, because it's just that initial discount or offer in that first text.
Yeah.
First 2 texts.
How do you make sure that like the customer experience is that it feels right to the customer for you to be sending a text and an email at the same exact time? Are you tweaking the messaging on that, or are you just realizing like it doesn't really matter, we just send both at the same time? Because I'm kind of thinking of it from the customer's perspective of, if you got a text, 30 minutes after you abandon, then, that's going to sound like, we're trying to help you with any questions that you had, right? And then if you had an email, a couple hours later, especially if you did not respond to the text, like that makes sense. I find it hard to understand like how sending both at the same time, unless the messaging serves each other, wouldn't feel like you're intentionally doing it so that they see it, right? Which is kind of what you said. Like how do you make sure that both of those serve the customer's experience?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. So in text, you're limited to the amount of characters you have. So it might be like, hey, you forgot this in your cart. And then the email is like, hey, here are the products you actually forgot. And then here's some common objections that we're answering questions, some reviews. So you're adding value in the email that you're sending as well. And then also, like, most people don't even see the email. Or like texts are open on the fly. I think 90% are open in like the first 5 or 10 minutes. Whereas like, an email, we get people opening emails 4 to 10 weeks later, maybe even a year later. I was looking at a Klaviyo profile the other day. They opened an email from a year ago today. Whereas like text, that doesn't really happen. Most people are opening up front. I don't think they converted. Okay. I think it was an unsub, but yeah. It's true.
That'd be amazing.
Happens. Yeah.
Got it, dude. This makes sense. I want to respect your time, so we're coming up on time. Anything else big on SMS that you think is important to dig into at this point? I know we didn't spend a ton of time on it.
Yeah, it's just a powerful revenue driver, and it's really simple to get started with. You want to do it smart, but you should be building that list right now, even if you're not communicating on a consistent basis with those people, just because you're not going to get the time back. And with compliance, you need to add people to your list in a way that is compliant. And you can't just take an old customer list and say, hey, they are compliant now. So like first and foremost, start building that list. And then 2, it's very powerful. It's like sending an email that has a 90% open rate. Like if you normally have a 10% open rate, which is like, not good. And you get a 90% open rate, like that's a 9x increase in eyeballs on your email, which is going to lead to a 9x increase in revenue. So it's very powerful. And we have clients who we scaled SMS into a 7-figure channel in less than 6 months, even for 7-figure brands. Like we have a customer, we're driving 100 to 130,000 a month in SMS alone. It's outperforming email on some days, and they're only a 500K per month brand. So they're seeing a large chunk of that revenue coming from SMS, and it's all new revenue too. And whenever we send out a text, they know it because they can feel it in their warehouse. They're like, hey, did you send another text today? And we're like, yeah. Why? And they're like, because our warehouse is working double time to get these orders out. So you can actually feel it. It's a great channel. These are really like once every 20 years that they actually come out and can be used. The technology is now here to be able to do it in a scalable and compliant way. Which didn't really exist 5 years ago. And so it's an awesome channel. Definitely take advantage of it. Build your list in the very least. And the same with email. Like email is still crushing at a very high level. The average, I think Shopify Plus store on Klaviyo is getting over 100x ROI on their spend. Super powerful. You can't find it anywhere. If you're really ROI driven, focus on channels like email and SMS to take what you're doing. Like don't get rid of acquisition, but you can really take your business and brand to the next level and unlock a lot of growth by driving more revenue from what you already have in terms of your existing traffic and customer base.
Awesome, dude. Awesome. This was super powerful. I want to ask you in a second, what people can do to continue the conversation with you, or like, the main resource on your site that you think would be helpful for them to dig deeper. But I always try to recap also at the end of what we kind of went through and some of the big takeaways. I think, one of the big items we dove into is like how email just fits in as a channel, right? Like acquisition is hard, Facebook's expensive, Google is Google, TikTok's big right now, but eventually that'll change. Like the acquisition channels change, but you don't own any of them, right? So like email fits in a way where it's like, this is your customer list and your prospect list, and you can leverage that. So it's super, super important to get right. Dylan also went into, what brands do well, what brands do right when it comes to email, right? So like being able to quantify it, having, the right flows in place, having the right optimization process in place. Like there's a number of things we dove into there. And then not, over segmenting, I think was another takeaway. Like segment based on what part of the customer journey has the best opportunity for you and the customer, not, these people want bought blue pants, so now they'll buy red pants, right? And like there's 3 of them, too small. So there's a lot of stuff here. We also talked about SMS, which I know Dylan recapped at the end. Bottom line, do SMS, build your list, start exploring it, because it's could be as powerful or more powerful than email, and it's an owned audience, right? As we, so we'll have a lot of stuff in the show notes of like additional resources and a much better recap than I just did. But if people want to continue the conversation with you, or like dig in to some resource that you've put together to kind of like study even further before connecting with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, so we've got a lot of resources on our website of tactical email examples, which you can find at wavebreak.co/resources. One of our most popular is a retention marketing guide, and how you can use email to fuel more profit in your business, and the math on how to double your business without doubling your ad spend. It's just a really different approach than most people take to email. So it's a really good read. That's at wavebreak.co/retention-marketing. It's not gated or anything like that. It's literally just a guide that you can read. And then you can get on the email list at wavebreak.co/resources, which every week we're sending out podcasts from my podcast, the Wavebreak podcast. So if you enjoyed listening to my voice, you can go listen to more of my voice at wavebreakpodcast.com. It's sponsored by Klaviyo and Justuno. We love them and interview a lot of really cool brands. Recently had on Chirp how they did 40 million last year with one SKU and sold out like 6 months from the year. Their VP of marketing went into all the secrets. I've interviewed founder CEO of Vanity Planet, Alex Dasmalchi, on how they scaled influencer marketing into this multi-8-figure brand. Stephen Borelli, Cuts Clothing, a lot of other e-commerce leaders getting their secrets behind the scenes and conversations just like this. I think there's a lot of interviews and podcasts out there that frankly just aren't very good. They're very boring, very enterprise. That's why I love coming on Jon's stuff, because I know it's always good and fun and actionable for store owners. And he's like, if you're looking for another podcast like Jon's, like Wavebreak Podcast is a good one. And then if you're a brand who's listening to this and you're like, oh my goodness, we're not doing any of this right, or we can take it to the next level, but we don't have the time or resources in-house, we can't find anybody in the marketplace to do this, like to hire in-house, which is a huge problem. Like a lot of brands are hiring us right now because you can't find any good email talent on the market. Like you'll post a job post and a month later have no good leads. If you want to take email to the next level and have a team of best-in-class experts running your email and SMS, you can learn more about working with us at wavebreak.co, and you can schedule a call at wavebreak.co/call.
Awesome, man. So many good resources. I forgot about the podcast. I should have mentioned that earlier, but really, really good resources there. Dylan's been interviewing, just e-com leaders for quite a few years. So there's some absolute gold in there.
I think you've been on it too, like 2 or 3 times. So if you guys want to hear Jon's perspective on this, go listen. Yeah.
We'll link that up in the show notes too, just for some context. I think we touched on some email stuff there as well, the abandoned cart flows and things that we do to kind of get chatting.
We should do another one sometime. We've learned a lot since.
I know. It feels like things are moving really quick. So we'll definitely dig in. But for everyone listening, the show notes will be at ecommercetownhall.com. So go ahead and check those out. I hope it's been helpful for you guys and you're able to basically implement a number of things from this. And on our end, we'd love to hear from you guys on, what you implement from this episode and how it works. So come back to ecommercetownhall.com. Let us know how it's going and we'll continue the conversation there. But for now, Dylan, thank you so much, man. I really, really appreciate the time and thanks for dropping so much knowledge here.
Thanks for having me, Jon. It's been a blast.
Awesome. Take care, dude. Thanks for tuning in to E-Commerce Town Hall. For For more resources related to today's episode, visit ecommercetownhall.com. And don't forget to check out Helpflow. Helpflow provides 24/7 live chat teams to over 100 e-commerce stores and can drive more sales while providing an awesome customer experience through their live chat agents. Helpflow's done-for-you 24/7 live chat team can predict and save abandons directly on your website by engaging with chat. They can also use conversational upsells to increase average order value in a way that feels good to visitors. Ultimately, they're going to provide an overall amazing brand experience to your customers. Learn more today at helpflow.com.